I want to welcome and open the meeting for the Des Moines Park and Recreation Board meeting at 5 o'clock on, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading off the wrong list, 5 o'clock July the 23rd. And Rebecca, will you take the roll? I believe we have a quorum.
Davis.
Here.
Sayers.
Here.
Acto.
Here.
Joseph.
Here.
Potter.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Pollard.
Here.
Romaine.
Here.
Banter.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Let's look at the agenda. Any comments on the agenda? Or if not, any changes? Motion?
I'll move the agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's look at the minutes from the last meeting. We've had a little bit of adjustment on the agenda, and Rebecca and Ben sent that out. We had a certificate presentation in order, but that has been postponed at this time. So we'll go right to the minutes of the June 25th meeting. Questions on that?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve? Seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that is approved. Okay, well, since we have no board action today, and I think this is the first time in many, many moons that we haven't had board action, and so we can go right to the receive and file. Ben, we'll turn it over to you.
As Ganesh walks up, I just want to first thank our Cemetery Advisory Committee and Ganesh and Ron. They've done a great job working on yet another non-sexy assignment, is going through Chapter 74, now 34 with cemeteries. As you might imagine, important work and work that's always hard to find its place in our work schedule to put in, especially during the summertime. But it made sense to us. We're going to continue to fulfill Live Des Moines, Live DSM, your master plan, our master plan that was adopted by the council, and you'll see that that's going to happen through here. And so without further ado, I'll let Ganesh walk you through the highlights. And like last time, we urge you to ask questions. We urge you to read it with a fine-tooth comb. And if anything doesn't make sense, let us try to explain it to you. If you think we need to change it, let's talk about that and make those changes. We do not expect board action tonight, as you know, because it's not listed for board action. So let Ganesh give us a little summary and we'll go from there.
Ganesh, during your presentation, if we have a question, is it okay if we ask the question at that time rather than wait till the end?
Chair Davis, it's your meeting, so absolutely.
Okay. I like your style.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Davis and members of the Parks and Recreation Board. Ganesh Ganpat, Parks and Rec Supervisor, Cemetery Manager. I want to first recognize Ann Dionato for her significant work in this proposed change to Chapter 34 of the city's municipal code for cemeteries. And as Ben said, we've had a great amount of participation also from staff, but Ron and Ben and Richard have also helped in this process. And the Cemetery Advisory Group gave great input during this process, and they did approve the proposed changes on July the 5th. And I'm grateful for my team and also our partners in the industry, funeral homes, monument companies, and vault companies who are also involved in this process. So you might ask yourself, well, why? Why would we make changes to an ordinance, especially this one? Well, the last time we had a overhaul of this ordinance was in 1989. And as you look at it, simply, it's out of date. There's been a number of industry changes in cemeteries. And also, as Ben said, as we looked at Live DSM, we wanted to be able to do some other things with the code. And we also feel that Chapter 74 plays a part in this as well. But the most significant aspect of what we want to do is tied to the Iowa Code 523I, also called the Iowa Cemetery Act. Now, it'd be real easy for me to say, legal mumbo jumbo here at this point, but I'm trying to remain as professional as I can and keep you all engaged. So stay with me. Now, we were out of alignment with a number of things with the Iowa Cemetery Code. In addition to the code changes, you will be seeing rule changes that will follow perhaps in the next several months. I want to be clear here. We are in compliance with the Iowa Code, but wanted to update our code to provide a more detailed roadmap of the Iowa Code.
Ganesh, can I just pause you just for a second?
Yes.
I think it might be helpful to put Ann on the spot. Could you just give a quick summary how ordinances are different than rules? And we'll talk about rules down the road here in the months to come, but it might help you understand why if you see something missing, it might be handled by a rule update that's going to come. We already have rules today for pools, sports complexes, parks, cemeteries. As you might guess, they're a little outdated, not as bad as 1989, but those things might happen in rules versus ordinances.
Right, and actually the Iowa Code, the cemetery chapter of the Iowa Code specifically recognizes that some of the regulations can be handled in rules, that they don't have to be in ordinance form. An ordinance is part of the municipal code, and it is specifically passed by the city council under a process dictated by the Iowa Code, which the normal process is that it's read and considered at 3 separate public council meetings. Rules are provided for under the municipal code that says that this board has the authority to review and recommend rules for approval to the city council. So all the rules would still go to the city council, but they don't become part of the municipal code. But they are passed by the city council after this board has reviewed them. Does that cover what you were considering, Ben?
And I wanted to ask you, does an ordinance and a state law ever conflict as far as your knowledge?
Well, we did review Chapter 34, and that was one of our goals, to make sure that there wasn't any conflict between the two, and an ordinance that, any ordinance that would be contrary to what the state code specifically says would overrule the ordinance.
Okay. So the state does take precedence.
Yes, if they have specifically designated a regulation, we can't be contrary to that.
Okay.
Back to you.
Thank you. So as review what's in front of you, we've highlighted it in a track changes format, making it real easy for you to see those changes. You will quickly see a lot of changes, first of all. And what we're recommending in various sections, I'm going to walk you through that a little bit chronologically today. So the major aspect of some of the things that we're doing deal with the management section, the roles of what exists right now for Parks Board and also for the Parks and Rec Director or his or her designee. So you will also see a lot of technical languages as we talk about sales and transfer and internment rights. And you'll hear that term more frequently, internment rights. They used to be called deeds, and it's old language. So we're changing our vocabulary and calling it internment rights. That spells out what an individual that purchases a space has the ability to do or not do. There's also, because we are a perpetual care cemetery, and what that means, because we're a perpetual care cemetery, is 20% of a sale of anything for a burial lot goes into a fund. That fund today is about $4.6 million, and last year it returned about $80,000 for our operations. So it's intended for maintenance of the cemetery. We also will be addressing a number of things relating to memorials. And when I say memorials, you could view it as a headstone or a footstone or a mausoleum. So you will hear that term and read that term often in the code. Another section, and this is where a lot of people got excited about, and our committee got real engaged because we talked about public conduct. Now, I'll tell you, when we went out and talked to when we went out and talked to funeral homes about what we're intending to do with public conduct in cemeteries, they said, pause and think a little bit about what you're proposing. So we'll touch on that in a little bit. So the Iowa Code, as Ann just referenced some of this, it is something that we use that as the backbone in helping to define terms and terminology. And once again, I could say a lot of legal mumbo jumbo here, but it's really relevant in everything that we do. We wanted to be clear and concise, not create a lot of confusion, not have a conflict like what George is mentioning, because state law trumps our ordinance. A few things to point out directly to you is that because we are 7 cemeteries, the operations essentially remain the same. Even the way that we go about changing fees remains the same. All right, so that shouldn't be any surprise to anyone. So the sale of interment rights, alignment with the Iowa Code, will allow us to better manage and deal with issues relevant to transfers and how we conduct business. The space is itself and how we define it is also relevant here. And once again, that's going to be more relevant for a person that owns a lot about what they can and cannot do. Standards are important. I think about memorials, for example, and vaults. Vaults meaning what a casket is on the inside of. There are standards. One of them that we currently have on the books that basically says that it's 600 pounds per square foot. That's out of date. So if you could imagine a heavy piece of equipment driving over a lot, that might cave in. The new standards is 5,000 pounds per square inch. So we're aligning ourselves better with those national standards. And one of the biggest changes that you're going to see in this area is right now we have the ability to do 2 interments per a space. 1 full interment of a casket burial and 1 cremated remains, or 2 cremated remains. What we're proposing is to actually do 4 interments on a space. So what that means is there could be 1 casket burial and 3 cremated remains, or 4 cremated remains. And the reason why we're doing this is simple. 60% of the burials nationally end in cremations. We're also looking at, well, extending the life of our cemetery. And the third reason is it's more economical for a family. As they're looking at if they have to buy a space and if they have to do an opening and closing for a burial, that costs them quite a bit. So we believe offering 4 interments is definitely going to help our business. So as we look at memorials, and once again, those are headstones, we essentially are looking to mirror some industry changes here. We're going to provide a little better clarity in what we're saying in our code. And we do this because it's interesting what people will call a headstone or a footstone. Recently, we had a person come in with a floor tile that was engraved that they thought would be a good memorial. Now, 1 piece of equipment that drives over that would shatter that. So it's important for us to have these standards to better define what people can and cannot do. If we want our cemetery to last, if we want it to look good down the road and be consistent, it's important to have that. Now, people have the flexibility and the ability to create any kind of headstone or footstone as long as it fits within the standards. And I would say we're very liberal on those standards. The only major requirement that we've said, which is not in the code, which will be reflected in the rules later, is it's 60% of the size of the grave. So most grave lots are about 10 feet, let's say. So that would be about 6 feet or so. Can you imagine a headstone that's that wide? So that's what we're talking about here, is coming up with some of those standards. We also will address removal of the headstone itself. Remember, the headstones are the responsibility of the family members. And sometimes people want to have that ability to change out a headstone. we don't have a lot of things that are current right now that define how to best do that. So in the new code, it will. Now, this whole process of what we're trying to accomplish took about 8 months, and Anne was very diligent, and Ben was, leading us towards this timeline to bring this in front of you all. But we took about 3 weeks to carve out this special area and being sure that we were in full alignment with perpetual care, because that's what the Iowa Insurance Commission looks closely at. I want to educate you briefly about perpetual care and temporary care, PCM and TCM. So PCM is that 20% of any sale goes into that fund. 80% then is used for essentially our operations, our salaries, mowing, ground maintenance, that's vehicle maintenance. That's what that 80% is used for. That 20% gets set aside. It's locked up, basically. Can only be changed by, well, I don't want to say any act of God, but it's pretty tough to go through and make any changes to that. And it's tied to the city's investment policy. So you might say, okay, you've got $4.6 million, Ganesh. I know you as a savvy investor could earn twice as much as that. You only brought in $80,000 last year. Well, the intent there is to never evade those funds and to be there for the long-term use of the cemeteries.
I'll
And-
add too, Ganesh, that perpetual care cemeteries, Des Moines is probably the opposite of why that law was ever created. Perpetual care maintenance cemetery is basically for smaller communities or townships that might go defunct. So that way, the next person that has to take it has a little bit of seed money to take it over with. For us, if something happens in Des Moines, which I don't ever envision happening, that Des Moines ceases to be a city, that's what that fund is for. Unfortunately, it's so locked up by state requirements that we really can't access it in an efficient way. So that number will continue to grow. And then what Ganesh is telling you, just so I can just restate this, is that the city has to have a low-risk approach to investing funds on purpose to protect the taxpayer. We can't put our funds in high-risk scenarios to hopefully get a good return. So we're very much limited. That $80,000 is not going to really help our bottom line. One more thing that truly severely restricts our ability to make these cemeteries cash flow. I just want to make sure you get that point.
Thank you. Okay, so I think the most important and exciting part of some of the changes that you'll see is in public conduct. Now, a few things here I want to be very clear about is we have a delicate balance. We have funeral homes that are telling us one thing and customers that are telling us essentially the same thing, is that families are grieving when they come to a site for a burial. So I want you to imagine this. So there's a man running through the cemetery without his shirt on, singing at the top of his lungs, and he's got a dog that's not on a leash, and the dog is digging up a fresh grave. And at the same time, you're there for a burial of a family member. So can you understand some of the balance that we've had to deal with? So with that said, yes, you will be able to use the roadways for jogging, for running, for walking, for biking, for wildlife observation. Yes, you can bring your dog. We want your dog on a leash, though. And the Parks Director has the ability to also set up other recreational activities during our operating hours, which are the same hours as the parks. So we've allowed some greater deal of flexibility. People have been coming to Glendale Cemetery, to that pond, for years to feed the geese. One of the things the current code talks about is that you're not supposed to disturb those geese. We've allowed some latitude in here for us to be able to have some recreational observation tours and whatever else that will give people who are currently using the cemeteries in certain ways the ability to do that, but also be respectful to those wishes of about 20,000 people that come to our cemeteries every year for attending a burial service.
Ganesh, I want to correct something. Is the cemetery hours are different than the park hours just by 2 hours. They both open at 6. Your new hours, as soon as council goes through their process, they've had one reading, there's 2 more to go, are till 10. Cemeteries are till 8. Just want to make sure that, and just not to call it
Thank you.
out.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. So as we look at what we're proposing and addressing other items relevant to public conduct, we're also addressing signs, smoking. We recognize there's some things relating to firearms and weapons that is being considered in Chapter 74 that we'll be consistent with. So today I ask you to look and review and receive this, knowing that you may have some questions or thoughts or comments you'd like to share. But for right now, I know you're just giving an opportunity to look at it for the first time over the past few days. Are there any initial thoughts or comments that I could help to answer today?
I have a couple questions,
Yes, sir.
because I did read through this. Who else read through it?
I did.
That's what I thought.
I did. I already asked the question.
First of all, I want to talk about ownership, where the deed word is gone, but certificate of internment, is that what we're using now? Now, Ganesh, can that ever be, once a person has paid for a certificate of internment, can that ever be voided? Or is there a reason to have that voided?
I think in your code, you'll see that if it hasn't been used in, was it 100 years? If I'm going off of memory here,
Yeah.
it's in there,
Well-
then it can be voided by the city.
But there's a difference in the language. This, on page 4, Ann and Ganesh, it says family. Are they talking about a family burial plot or an individual burial plot? About 3/4 the way down. See where it says family? And that's where I had concerns. So if you're saying 100 years, is that specific to an individual? Let's say, for example, a person buys 2 lots. A husband and wife buy 2 lots. Is that considered family?
The way that's written, the first and foremost, and Ann or Ganesh, correct me if I'm wrong here, is the date for the 100 years starts the day that we give you a receipt of the deed, if you will. And so the clock starts then for the 100 years.
I thought it was my understanding that the clock started on the burial time or when.
Is that right?
In the last burial, there hasn't been a
Last
burial,
burial.
so whether that is for the
Okay.
date of you bought it, or there's never, or the date of the last interment.
So say a person bought the lot 10, 12 years ago, but hasn't used it. Now there's a burial in the next 2 or 3 years. The 100 years starts then?
Yeah, that's,
Correct.
Yes.
yeah.
Then what can happen at the end of 100 years?
If there's zero use, it can go back to the city to be resold. But if there's already a person being interred there, it's not, it's off, it's been used.
Okay, so the 100-year that we're talking about is specific to an empty
Yes,
certificate of internment or an empty gravesite.
yes.
Correct.
Not one that's currently filled.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And it would revert back to the city, however, George, we've never actually reverted. This just gives us the ability to do it.
I thought that we ran into some situations earlier in a park board meeting where we had some situations where something had to be moved or a road was interfering, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, where the road actually went over some grave sites or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, are you talking about Sims Cemetery?
Could be, could
Okay.
be.
So when University Avenue expanded, X number of bodies had to be moved from that cemetery.
That was the 1970s, I think. wasn't
Okay,
it?
Yeah,
all right,
and-
all right.
and that would
Because
be-
you brought that up in one of your discussions.
Yeah,
And
so
that would be
good, pay
different
attention.
from this case.
Let me give you an example of how this might be used and help you understand where we're coming from. There's always a request now and again, but almost every other month at Woodland Cemetery. The history, the mystique of being there, being turned there is always something. So with families that no longer exist or cease to exist with any family lineage, we might be able to find a spot that was sold, never used.
Okay.
Today, we don't have a way to resell that. And it will never be used, most likely because that family doesn't even know they even have it, if there's even family left. We're trying to come up with a way to be able to be more efficient and use these and recycle lots that aren't being used. We just start with 100 years because we felt that was a good number to start with on the life cycle of a human being, so.
Well, now that you've explained it, very thoroughly, is the 100 years too far out of a, you know, what definition of a price point. I mean, 100 years is a long time of,
I think we just picked 100 just off of, not a lot of science, but thinking about how life expectancy is getting longer and longer.
Okay.
And it'd be less likely to be a political decision if it was 50 years versus 100 years.
okay.
And I don't think anybody in this room will be here in 100 years, so we don't have to worry about that one, right? So,
And one can designate, so let's say that you and your spouse decide to have that, you buy 2 lots. Your family members, you could list those individuals as other people that could be on that lot. And that's a lot owner form that you fill out that expresses that indication. But after a period of time, if it isn't used, we do have the ability to have it revert back. You're also talking about transfer, and that's covered in section 62 here as well, where we talk about if it needs to go from one person to another, how that transaction is done.
I also think that I want to compliment your staff and your committees for allowing for, what do you call it, internments in one side. I think that is fantastic in today's world where cremation is a big thing, because I think that is an economical advantage for a lot of people. So what you're saying is, so I get this clear, is I'm always going to use the example of 2 lots, because I think a lot of families buy 2 lots. So I could have 4 and 4. I could actually have 8 internments in that one thing of cremations.
correct.
For an in-ground burial, correct.
Okay.
Now, George, there are some exclusions to that, for example, in veteran sections, that is not something that's allowed. It's just the veteran that gets interred there.
Okay. All right. Now, what about are there funerals, Ganesh, where, I don't know the term, but where they have no casket or no coffin or they're just natural?
The Islamic section, but that was with a separate side agreement today that
Okay,
they have. So
okay.
we have, think of it as exclusive use sections. There's different cultures that have different traditions that they must follow. Jewish have different rules than Taidam, than Islamic. Islamic is what you're asking about, because that's the one that we have today. They're allowed to do this, but they have a side agreement that makes that exclusive when they pay for that whole section ahead of time, basically, and we work that. Okay.
And George, those remains are not cremated, they're full internments.
Okay. And so those would be exempt from,
Correct.
okay. I personally think this stuff is interesting. Now, when I was in my 20s, I could give a fat rat, but now that I'm in my late 40s, I think this, I used to be on the cemetery committee, and I'll tell you what, Ganesh was fascinating to listen to on all this. It was very interesting, very interesting.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the recreational programs that you would envision that could happen in cemeteries beyond feeding the ducks and walking with your dog and tours. What beyond that would you permit?
Well, I'm going to defer to Ben, and that's the answer to that
That's
question.
a great question. So I'll remind you that this was exactly an extraction from Live DSM that you all approved. So I call it passive recreation. You're not going to see sports courts or tossing the baseball or the frisbee, nothing like that. Passive recreation, bird watching or wildlife watching, walking, running, walking the dog. There could also be history walks, which we do today. The educational purpose, cultural purpose walks. Maybe I could even see down the road the ability to do a fundraiser. I'm going to test some of the new things with you, I think, obviously to make sure we're all in concurrence, maybe in the executive session if we ever do anything like that. But we're not doing active recreation there. That's not the job. That's not the goal. In fact, today we're out of compliance. Today, technically, you cannot walk in there today. Now, do the police have enough time to chase a walker down? No. And technically, you can't have a walking trail, which we have in Glendale Cemetery right now. Out of compliance. We have to correct that.
Well, can you, are you permitted to run and walk outside of the roadways?
You are not permitted to do any of that today. You can only be in the cemetery to visit a loved one's site, family site, or to be a part of a funeral. That is it right now.
So now people could actually run on the grass all around the...
It says in the code, we ask them to stay on the streets,
Okay.
the roads. Yep.
Okay, just
And
wondering.
be respectful.
Okay.
So, and then, remember, that whole discussion at the very beginning, we have the ability to always modify rules to further manage this. If we see a problem, we can come to you and say, hey, this has gotten to be a little more of what we thought it would be. I think we can take care of it by rules and to see how things go the first year and report back to you, if that's acceptable.
Would you think it would be acceptable to have like a fun run through Glendale Cemetery?
Only if it was very, very well ratcheted down where it was definitely a connection to the history of the cemetery or proceeds going towards cemeteries of somehow. But what I would do, would be the first thing we'd do is test it with our cemetery advisory committee, ask them what they feel, if it feels it's within
Yeah.
the new code, and we start right there. If they did, and I did, I would probably just let it go. If we had a difference of opinion, we might run it up to the park board and ask the board to say, what do you feel?
Yeah.
But it would be very, very unlikely we'd do a lot of that type of thing. But again, to date, all these history walks we're doing are not technically in compliance. Or we've done flag retirement ceremonies, as you know, in the past. Those are in compliance as long as we ask your permission, but I don't think that the board needs to spend up their agenda time doing something like that. And that would be something the director would make a decision on. But
Yeah.
I'm open to any feedback. Good questions.
You're still going to allow the masses and stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That is considered a memorial service, so yes.
Okay. Questions?
So is there somebody charged with, in reading the code about stopping or being near where a service is occurring, but you're not part of the service?
There's a distance requirement.
Right.
And it's all about how well we can police that, but I can't
That was
remember
my
the details,
question.
but
Who's in charge of enforcement of that, or how?
100 feet is what you're
Yes.
saying? I remember reading it in here. There is a distance requirement that says if you see an active service, please stay 100 feet away from that.
Right.
That's what our committee came up with, those rules. So I like that. And it's something we can do with our on-site staff. If we see somebody and say, hey, we have a service today, please use a different route. If this is your normal route, go around it today.
And vehicles are not
I really
prohibited.
believe we have 99% of the public that's going to want to be really respectful of these situations. And one thing we've looked at too is, I'll draw one more conclusion for you, is when we ranked 39th in the best park score we just recently applied for, one of the things that helps us is putting these cemeteries on those lists as parks. I'll tell you, I've been here now since 2007. Waveland Park Neighborhood Association has always considered Glendale their park, believe it or not. They don't consider the golf course because the golf course is ratcheted down where you can only use the golf course during the nice summer months, spring months, and fall months. Very limited because it's being used for golf. They will use the cemetery as their area of where they'll recreate at, and that's that passive recreation once again, but they consider it their park. Well, what helps us consider this as part of our passive recreation counts to help our community fill those gaps in. We can fill gaps in different ways, so something to think about.
And Section 205 addresses also about vehicles not being able to stop directly in front of a service and so on.
Right.
Good question.
Anything else? Anything else? Thank you, Ganesh. Very, very well presented.
Thank you, board.
Motion?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion to receive and file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Before we move on, I just also want to just point out Joel, he's always very quiet, but he did a lot of work behind the scenes with our committee and our liaison, so thanks for your leadership too on this. All right, next up is Joel. You'll notice Joel's attire is different because Joel has a meeting right after this to go out and have a class. So to let Joel relax the attire code tonight we usually have, and so he's getting ready to go out. What are you doing tonight, Joel?
Grace Lake.
Grays Lake paddleboarding?
Yep.
So if we get done in time, you all want to join Joel, you can go paddleboarding here after this. So.
My class is full, sorry.
Maybe I guess I can't now, I guess.
Chair Davis, members of the board, I'd like to thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Joel Van Roekel. I am the Supervisor of Environmental Education, and I'm here this evening to present to the Parks Board, Did You Know on Evergreen Park? Evergreen Park is located at 2000 Evergreen Avenue. The park is actually two open areas connected by a path. The property lays south of East Park Avenue and north of Evergreen Avenue on the west side of Southeast 22nd Street. In the 1850s, James Crane, became the first owner of the northeast quarter section of land that included our future Evergreen Park. James was an early Fort Des Moines settler as well as a businessman. The site changed owners 8 times before it actually officially became a city park in 1978. One of the most noted owners was Miss Elizabeth D. Higgins. Elizabeth was born in Dubuque County and married at the age of 19. She was the mother of 13 or 11 children, we can't be sure. Elizabeth took over the property in 1889 when her husband passed away, and she very successfully ran the farm with her children. Some of the things that Elizabeth was noted for in Des Moines are, in 1907, she sued the DM City Railway for $5,000 because of an accident where her buggy was hit on Walnut Street and she was thrown from her buggy. Today's values, that would be about $130,000. She has claims based on when Iowa actually became a state in 1846 to be the oldest Iowan living in the state. And also based on that, when Iowa became a state, she was the first child born to Iowa settlers. In 1976, Mr. Angelo Bellizzi appeared before the Parks and Recreation Board explaining the proposal of a new housing development to be built in the area of Evergreen and Southeast 22nd Street. Plans called for the creation of a park within the housing development, said park to become the property of the city. The developer, John R. Grubb Incorporated, would pay for all the site construction and costs and has requested that the Parks Division be responsible for the maintenance of the park. Staff recommended preliminary approval, subject to approval through zoning and planning. It was agreed that the developer would be responsible for grading and seeding all of the open areas in the park, including an area for future tennis courts, installing cement sidewalks, lighting, planting trees, and a playform structure. There was also original talk of a pool to be built, but it was eliminated very early in the process. In the fall of 2009, a playground was added to the park. And then in 2011, there were more improvements made. 2 lacrosse courts, a basketball court, and an ADA exercise equipment area was added. Today, Evergreen Park is 5.5 acres. It has the amenities of picnic tables, benches, open lawn space, a backstop for softball or baseball games, basketball court, the playground, the lacrosse courts, and the ADA exercise equipment. I want to thank you, Chair Davis, and the other members of the board for your time. Any questions?
What is a talk rock court?
Lacrosse is like volleyball, but you use your feet, and it's a smaller ball. It's incredible to watch if you Google it and you get the best players. The net is lower, and there's 3 people on the court. It's just amazing.
Very athletic. It's like hacky sack met volleyball.
Yeah. They jump up in the air, flip upside down, smack the ball down, and then twist their body like a cat so they don't land flat on their back.
Hard surface?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what blows me away.
Is Evergreen's Park still split into 2 parks
Yes.
today?
Yep.
Can you go
and
back to
there's-
that first slide where you show that? map?
Yeah, and there's a sidewalk.
I'm trying to
Yep.
I live in a neighborhood and I'm trying to, I've never been up that path. There's a missing part of the park?
There's just a little sidewalk that goes between people's side yards. It was laid out by the developer, the history tells us, and some of these rules and these parks were given to the city. Sometimes we got probably not the most great design of access to parks. So we would have rather had one big contiguous piece of land other than this little stretch. And I'm sure neighbors would like just not to have a little stretch in their backyards for people going back and forth. But we don't get complaints. There's a few lights there that the path is lit, so you can go back and forth. And the playground would be, if you're looking at your map, on the south side of your screen, and the sports courts would be on the north side.
Right. It's really 2 different uses.
It is.
Park.
It breaks up sports, and then it breaks up your typical park with a playground and shelter.
So where's the softball? Softball's up top?
Yep, it would be.
No, it's on the bottom.
No, there's a softball backstop right over here in the corner. It was taken out.
Did we take the one out that used to be in the
There's one in the back
north
corner
part?
behind that. If you look in that bottom right picture of the playground exercise equipment, way in the back, in that back corner, there's a softball that comes out.
Right, but that's the north piece.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
the north piece. Yep.
What's on the south piece?
South piece.
Playground equipment,
Yes.
the other playground
I'll have
equipment.
to go there on the way home.
Yep.
Sorry,
That's your homework.
that's my homework, all right.
Park in the middle, and then you can go either direction on the sidewalk.
Basketball courts get a lot of use.
A ton of use. A ton of use.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joel.
Have fun at Gray's Lake. All right. Jenny. That time of year, it's time to engage our volunteers and put the call out that we need a lot of help to be able to pull up our pedestrian trail count. She'll give you more details.
Okay. Good evening, Chair Davis and members of the Park and Recreation Board. I'm Jenny Richmond, Planning and Development Administrator, here this evening to talk about the National Bicycle and Pedestrian Documentation Project. As been mentioned, it's quite a mouthful, so we lovingly refer to this project as BikePed for short. So at the basics here, we recruit volunteers to help us with this project. Couldn't be done without them. So just trying to get the word out this evening. If you know of anybody who might be interested, we'd love to share more details with them. So volunteers usually work in pairs, and they count and survey bicyclists and pedestrians on trail and street locations that have been predetermined. This is a national project, so we stick by the guidelines that the national folks outline. So there's 3 days that are selected for us to count on, and they dictate the times that we count during as well. The end result provides us with estimated annual bicycle and pedestrian traffic counts for each location where the data is collected. The volunteer project gets citizens and advocates out on our trail system to collect data, which helps us do 3 different things. It helps us identify and prioritize where new bike and pedestrian facilities should be constructed, which is very helpful. It helps us evaluate the effectiveness of existing facilities. A lot of times the survey data that we get back is essential in understanding some of the use patterns or things that people who use the same route daily pick up on that even our folks who are out on the system all the time don't see either. And then what really affects us sort of day to day in the planning division is the information that we need to apply for the grants. That helps us with a significant amount of funding to keep closing some of those trail gaps that we still have in the system. So in short, building relationships with trail users and deriving trail use data are the goals of the project. See somebody famous in this photo, hasn't he? So in 2019, this will be our 10th count and survey that we have carried out over the course of a number of years. This year, our counts are going to be in mid-September, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday, the 10th, 11th, and 14th. And on Tuesday and Wednesday, the counts are in the evening from 5 to 7, and then on Saturday between noon and 2. We typically stick with about the same locations every year, and in 2019, we're not making any changes. Next year, we'll have potentially some new sections open up, and we might make a few adjustments or additions. But this year, if you are a regular volunteer for the project, you'll likely be able to get your same exact spot. So once a volunteer selects their preferred dates and locations, they'll go through a quick training and are provided with the forms that are necessary to do the project and equipment needed. So you'll see a map in the top corner. that shows the volunteer exactly where to stand and the line that they count people going across. We always get funny questions like, do dogs count? Do turtles count? Do squirrels count? And so those are always kind of entertaining as well. The count form helps the volunteers stay organized while they're out there for that 2-hour duration. Some places are extremely busy, and so it helps to really keep the count organized, and other sites not quite as busy, and it just kind of helps them click through the time. The survey card is just as important as the counting, and the volunteers are all provided with slips to hand out, and then the site numbers are recorded on those so a person taking the survey can say where they passed through. And then safety is always paramount, so they're provided with a high visibility vest. You can see some of our volunteers in action here, and that's really the essence of the project. People who care about the trails, engaging other users to collect the data that helps us build and maintain a better, more robust trail network. So Rebecca provided you with a handout. This is definitely not something you're expected to see up on the screen, but this, for anyone who really likes to see trends over the course of years, it's really interesting to take a look at this. So this is still just 2018 data and backwards from there. So once we get 2019 collected, we'll plug it into this chart. We may have to start using a bigger piece of paper. But the comprehensive results of the past 9 years have been counted, handed out to you. Many numbers on the page. Probably the most interesting things to see are some of the overall trends upwards, which shows, that we're really reaching a lot more people year after year getting out on the trail system. It shows some of the new locations coming online. Closer to the bottom of the chart, you can see how those have been added. And then there's a few really superstar locations in there where we get really high counts year after year too. So those are always fun to tout.
Is that correct, Jenny, that almost 10 million, is that number correct?
So, right, the way that breaks down is that's the total number of users who are counted at that point, extrapolated, and then we divide it over the number of locations that we've counted at to get the average. So some locations you'll see are right at 1 million or just under 1 million, but then some sites don't have quite as many, so the average across the system hovers around about 350,000 per year, right in that range. So it's still just fantastic when you consider we have about 63 miles of trails within the city.
That's tremendous.
Amazing.
So this next image shows you that we are really just at the very beginning of recruiting for this year. One of the great tools that we use to get folks plugged into certain spots is our neighborhood liaisons. So many of the folks within the department are assigned to neighborhoods, and if a neighborhood has a location within it, the neighborhood groups are encouraged to volunteer for that spot. They feel more ownership over a spot that's within their neighborhood, so it just makes sense. So once we get clicked into that connection a couple years ago, that really helped us get these spots filled. Another thing that we're doing a little differently this year that I think we're going to be able to pull off is an online training, just watching a YouTube video, so people can do that on their own time, come in and pick up supplies on their own time, and that kind of cuts down the amount of time that they'll actually be out that same day for volunteering. So I think that's going to give them some more flexibility. We also, a couple years ago, started dividing up the sites into high, mid, and lower priority sites. And so if a person isn't really attached to one site and they see that there's a higher need in one location, maybe they'll drift towards one of those high priority sites. So if folks are interested in volunteering, the link is on this slide. You can also just go to dmparks.org and search for bike ped and kind of click through a couple things and you'll navigate your way there. But again, it's just really not possible without a whole lot of volunteers. And we do have incentives. Folks who volunteer for one spot, they get a $10 park bucks that can be used towards a number of different things. And if you volunteer twice, you get a free MAR registration. So that's really wonderful too. In 2018, for example, we had over 76 shifts filled, and volunteers gave 336 hours of time valued at way over $8,000. So it really is a true value to the department. So yeah, in closing, the project is very valuable, helps us keep our department's trail priorities fresh with new data annually, helps us identify operation issues and successes, and it also helps us do more with less by quantifying trail needs and grant applications. I'd like to thank you all for your time and encourage you to volunteer or get the word out. It's great too. I know a lot of high school students need Silver Cord hours, and if they're the right age, they can do it on their own or grab their parent or another adult to go out with them. So good family time too. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Nope. Thank you so much. I know I've been here a lot with this project. So thanks so much and have a great evening. See you in just a couple minutes.
All right, Matt's up next.
Chair Davis, members of the Park and Recreation Board, Matt Kalsevich, Recreation Manager. Thank you for this opportunity to share information with you tonight about a tremendous event, our Bike Back to School event. This will be the third year of the program, and it will be held on Saturday, August 3rd at 9 a.m. at the Des Moines Police Station near the west entrance. Now, this program is a wonderful example of a community partnership, and I'll really highlight some of that here in a moment. But the core opportunity for youth is this is a free bike for the first 75 youth in attendance. Now, no registration is required, so it is first come, first serve. And the eligibility is based around the Des Moines Public School free and reduced lunch program. So any student that's eligible for that is actually eligible for one of these 75 refurbished bikes. And it is very much a focus about getting ready for the school year, thus the name, but it's a recreational opportunity as well that we're excited for the youth to be able to potentially engage in who may not have the opportunity otherwise. As part of the event, they also provide helmets and locks. And then those youth can test their skills out on a safety course that's set up as part of the event. Now, to really talk about the community partnership element of this, the Des Moines Street Collective has led the charge in the last 3 years to bring these groups together to provide this opportunity. They've been the lead on refurbishing the bikes. The partnership with the Des Moines Police Department, who oftentimes have collected these bikes and work then directly with the Street Collective to get them prepared to give away and have them be reused for a very positive purpose like this, has really been at the core of this whole initiative. Certainly Park and Rec and the promotion of the use of trails and safety along with Des Moines Police has been very much the focus. Fairway has come on board, again, directly in connection with the Street Collective's effort to put together this event to provide the food. And then the Variety Club is providing the helmets and the locks for the events too. So really trying to be a comprehensive opportunity for youth to have a bike, perhaps to ride to school, to use in a recreational capacity, to be safe, with some of the additional training and education that will happen on site, the promotion of the use of the helmet, which is required for the youth in the community, as well as the lock and that element of being able to go to several places that they might very independently and know that they'll have the security for their bike. So again, just a wonderful program that we're continuing to spread the word about in partnership with these other groups, and would certainly appreciate your help to get this information to anybody who might need to take advantage of this opportunity. With that, I'd be happy to try and answer any other questions.
What's the date?
August 3rd, Saturday, August 3rd, 9 a.m., Des Moines Police Station, West Entrance.
We'll send these presentations to you sometime this week yet. Rebecca can get to that, so that way you get the link for the pedestrian counts if you want to do that. You'll have these data if you want to share it with anybody.
Street Collective has some additional information about this specifically on their website.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now on to, something we started last year was trying to give you an overview on construction projects. The board doesn't vote on construction projects, that's a city council authority. However, these things affect all the things that we do, so we think it's important that you know what's going on in the park. You get to see some of the great detail on what we're working on right now from a construction aspect. So Jenny's, as you know, is in charge of our construction division. She's going to lead you through this year's construction plans and how things are going.
Sounds great. So again, good evening, Chair Davis, members of the board, Jenny Richmond, Planning and Development Administrator, and as been mentioned, here to talk with you about our construction overview for 2019. Our last construction project update was at the 2018 July board meeting. We've been very busy since then. Rebecca provided another handout for you, and it gives a quick summary of 3 categories of projects that we have either completed construction since the last time that we talked about this, or are under construction currently or expected to start in 2019. As you can see, there's quite a few in each category, and the map here is we'll go through these here real quick here. There we go. The maps and this presentation don't account for the work in our division that is helping us to prepare for the next phase of construction, or the grants that we write, the coordination of work on our properties such as public art installations, and the many other activities and duties that are part of our role in the department. You can see from the completed list here the diversity of the project type, scale, and location that we have completed in the last year, since July last year. Some include help from other departments and agencies, and some are entirely done with Parks Department staff and crews pitching in to make the most of resources and do the most good possible for all areas of the city. It's incredibly rewarding to now go out to these locations and see people enjoying improvements like the fully reinvigorated Bell Turner Park that was just dedicated late last week, and knowing what work like the resurfacing at McHenry Park Spray Ground are allowing our operations to run more smoothly. This next slide shows the 23 major projects that are currently under construction, which is also a very diverse list. And then this final map are projects that we expect to start construction in 2019 but haven't quite gotten underway yet. So we'll jump in to a survey of key projects that are either in the midst of construction or that have just wrapped up in the last month or so. And please feel free at any point to jump in with questions, because there are quite a few projects through the list, so happy to be interrupted at any point. The first project here that we'd like to show you is taking place at Berlin Sports Complex, home to Berlin Pool. As part of engineering's combined sewer separation project, they were in need of a space for excess stormwater storage when the pump station at 2nd Avenue, kind of at the southeast corner of the site there, that little building, when it reaches capacity. So when this was brought to us a couple years ago, as you can imagine, we were a little hesitant because the park system is so short on open, flat recreation and athletic surfaces. So we thought after some collaboration, we could possibly make it a win-win, and landed on this solution. So this is north is over to the right. So it's a little bit different orientation than the aerial photo that was just up. But what we landed on was excavating soil for the new detention basins would be placed on the athletic fields to give them a much better surface. And if you had ever played any sports over at Berlin before, you know that the fields could use a little bit of work. So we do feel like this was a big win-win for us. It also creates a little bit of buffer from busy 2nd Avenue, and will give the site a little bit more character once all the native plants and trees grow up a bit. And here you can kind of see the project underway. Again, it being so close to the river high water table, construction has paused for a bit. The contractor needs to remob closer to fall when we get to the point where we can seed and plant the trees. But if you go by it right now, this is about what you'll see. You'll be able to tell that the basin is in place and the sports fields can see are crowned, and will drain better and have a much better soil surface to them. So the next project to share with you this evening is our CITA skills course. So Central Iowa Trails Association, or CITA, is a great partner of the Parks Department. They've collaborated with us to install a number of mountain bike focused improvements at Ewing Park, and their latest endeavor is a skills course. The project is funded by a grant from REI, and work is anticipated to begin this fall. hopefully also complete this fall. Once they start rolling, that we'll be able to get that wrapped up. The Columbus Park shelter renovation is a signature project this year, and the fourth of our 1930s WPA era open air shelters that are converted to an enclosed shelter to serve today's growing need for quality venue space at a very affordable rate. So these shelters are rented almost continuously through every weekend of the year, and a lot of times during the week as well. The capacity of this one will be just over 60, so it makes it our second largest one next to Ding Darling Shelter. So we worked with consultant Substance Architecture to envision the potential of the new shelter, taking advantage of both the historic features and adding new components to reach the project goals. Here you can see construction underway and the care taken by the contractors and staff to respect this special place. There were a lot of messages that people left on the walls. This used to be a place for changing for the wading pool that was adjacent to the shelter back historically. We even found some baskets that kiddos would store towels and toys in, and the baskets are being repurposed right now and will be added as a decor for the shelter. So the history of the building is incredibly important to the neighborhood surrounding Columbus Park. They fought to save the shelter and were there to celebrate its rededication just 2 weeks ago on July 8th. We have just a few minor punch list items to complete, and then it will be a wrap. The James W. County Sports Park, both baseball and soccer parks, have always been hard to navigate to for first-time visitors. The project consists of 5 components placed on Southeast 14th, along Hartford Avenue, and also at the soccer park. They will be a wonderful, much-needed wayfinding system, provide the landmark parks with equally grand entrance features, and also provide proper recognition to the soccer park's major donor, Mid-American Energy. Here you can see renderings of the 2 most significant components, the archway, the full archway that goes over Hartford, and also the more grand signage that will be at the soccer park. And that component of the project is complete. So the photo in the bottom right is actually from today, so everything is up and functional and looks fantastic. The other images are of the archway signs. The bases are incredibly complex. There's so much rebar that goes into these. The formwork is really intricate. The metal components were fabricated in Council Bluffs and are arriving on flatbeds. So it's, though just for signs, it's a pretty intense project.
What's the budget of that county project?
It's 90% funded by private funds and 10% city funds. The city funds were basically the staffing costs from engineering and parks. So it was around just around $700,000.
Mid-American.
Mid-American paid for the sign too.
Yeah. And a little bit of consultant fees in that too for that city cost. Yeah. Yep. So we expect it to wrap up by early September and encourage you all to look for a dedication invitation after Labor Day. The west side of City Hall's grounds on the riverside was damaged by a high water event that devastated the existing Pioneer Longlook Garden. Because of ongoing downtown bridge construction, the timing has not been right until this fall to begin the restoration of the space. We expect to begin work on the hardscape this fall with plantings installed in the spring of 2020. And this project, although relatively designed from the existing composition, we're going to switch out a couple of plants that weren't performing quite as well as the original designers had hoped, and in consultation with our parks division and others, we're going to get some stuff in there that'll be successful over the long run. Efforts to install a landmark overlook at McCray Park began in earnest in roughly 2016, with EMC as the project's generously donor and Simonson Associates heading the consultant team. Here you can see the vision in a rendering that helped to guide the project through the design phases. And here it comes to life, very similar to the preliminary ideas. And then the most recent projects or photos show that the project is substantially complete, but waiting the completion of phase 2 of the McCray Park Road before it's dedicated and open to the public. Here you can see the viewfinder right in the middle of the photo there. So if you look through that, you can get an even better view of the downtown skyline and specific buildings. And speaking of McCray Park Road Phase 2, the map here shows the division of the phases that we're restoring the Park Road in. So phase 1 was completed with the shelter renovation last year. Phase 2 in yellow is what we're working on right now. And phase 3, we're waiting on that until the dredging of the pond is complete. And I'll show you a couple pictures of the pond a little bit later on. But phase 2, we feel like is especially exciting. During the design process, we explored a couple of different sections on how we might divide traffic, because there's so many bicyclists that use this for training and people who walk through the park as well. And we wanted to encourage that and, safety first. So we looked at dividing up auto traffic with pedestrian and bike traffic, and can see through these construction photos how that progresses. So that top photo over on the left shows just the curb being installed and the sub base, and then the first lifts of asphalt going in, and then the center curb that will divide the traffic types. So we're excited to see how this functions, and if all goes well, we'll likely carry it out in phase 3 as well. So this year, we were lucky enough to open 2 spray grounds and 2 park restrooms. Tower Park's design inspiration came from the historic and architecturally significant water tower next to the park. Here you can see the design and construction progression of both the spray ground and the 2-sided restroom building. That's in keeping with the system-wide restroom plan that we completed last year. The features at Tower Park were dedicated on June 13th with much support from the neighborhood, and a good time was had by all, especially the mayor, who may have gotten sprayed a little bit by one of the water cannons. So we all had a great time. Nice hot day for it. So.
What happened at the spray park in Waukee that they had to close it down because of slipping?
Right. My understanding is that the surface was a bit slippery, and so they wanted to make sure that they got that taken care of before reopening it to
standardized surface for all spray parks?
There's a couple of different choices that people can go down. Generally right now we drift more towards just concrete with the right room finish, and that seems to be doing the best job for us right now. There still is maintenance that Ron's staff has to do on a regular basis for that too. With all the sunscreen, and if there's any shady spots, sometimes we can get some areas that need to be power washed off. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I'm sure they'll land on the right spot.
They're putting a rubberized surface over it or something.
Oh yeah, I don't know the details.
I read that, and I had talked to their staff. They asked for our opinions because we have 10 of these now. And we can tell you that, we've learned some lessons as well. We didn't have what the problem they had by any means. We have one rubber surface, one up at McHenry. And once you build a rubber surface one, you're stuck with that design because it's got a lip of concrete that everything's built into the rubber. So rubber is going to have to be replaced. The thing that we learned from rubber is that it's not slippery, it's a little bit softer, but it does grow algae because it's a darker color. So when the water goes off and it's still wet and the sun sets, it grows an algae. Like your irrigation might on your yard if it sets in the wrong time of year. But we've been very fortunate that our designs have all been really well thought out, and we don't have a problem like Waukee's had.
But didn't they have like 2 or 3 serious accidents within the first week?
Sounded like they had a lot of folks that were falling because of the slickness of the surfacing.
Yeah. Yep. Good question. So the second of the 2, Sheridan Park's design inspiration is in keeping with the Sheridan Garden Neighborhood Association's theme. The base is a green leaf with a garden-inspired above-ground spray ground features. Here you can see the construction progression of both the spray ground and the single-sided restroom. That's also in keeping with the system-wide restroom plan we completed last year. The features at Sheridan were dedicated on June 19th with a great turnout from the Neighborhood Association and many other supporters. The original Reno Memorial dog park location was heavily affected by flooding roughly a year ago. Following that event, we began to explore relocating the dog park to an available property just a couple blocks west on Hubble Avenue. After extensive public and user group input, the ideas began to come together. The rendering you see here depicts the park improvements that are currently in permitting phase. We hope to receive word from the Iowa DNR shortly on their determination and move forward with the project. Bringing Riverview Park back to life with a new twist has been a labor of love since at least 2014. Here you can see the concept for a grand stage and venue inspired by the site's amusement park history. Fast forward to 2018-2019, construction has been bid out in 3 phases, and even with 3 different contractors on site, this project is progressing very well, and we're very thankful for that. It's extremely exciting to see both the full site and the stage come to life so quickly after so many years of work with the Parks Area Foundation and other partners. We are currently on schedule to complete construction in early summer 2020. Fairmont Park's renovation was completed about 2 years ago, and it has been loved to the point of needing a little reinforcement in the area of the hillside slide. We had a similar approach included as a possible ad alternate during the original construction project, but we're just shy of funding it. The silver lining is an even more refined approach with the advantage of truly understanding how the grades and stormwater function. These renovations should be complete before the end of fall this year, weather permitting. We are excited to see how the larger area at the bottom of the slide and the added play value are received by the neighborhood and all who visit this park.
So what you're looking at there, just as in case you don't see what we always see, is the kids, although the stairwell exists today, the kids would run right back up the left side and it just can't grow grass and become slippery, and then the mud would run down to the bottom of the slide. So the original design had this, but we couldn't afford the AstroTurf, if you will. That's what's field turf. So now we've made them a field turf run up the other side that will be more maintainable for us and sustainable too. So that will be a great solution, I believe.
Yeah, and the limestone steps that are there right now, those will stay in place. So I see every time I go out there, I see people, doing stairs and using them for exercise. So that feature will definitely stay in. So a couple different ways to get up and down. So shifting gears a little bit here, we actually shifted some priorities in funding, and we're able to complete the second and third and hopefully final phase of Glendale Cemetery Road renovations, at least for now. You can see from the photos of existing conditions that this will be a significant upgrade to the cemetery. We expect work to go quickly once the contractor is able to mobilize and be completed by late fall 2019. Each year, we plan for a phase of approximately 10 park entry signs to be installed at various sites across the city. Phase 6 is well underway and should wrap up within about a month. We have our approach mapped out through Phase 9, which should complete this multi-year project. So I really like this project. I think it helps unify all of our parks. People are going to different sites all around town. They immediately know if it's a Des Moines park or not. And I think they're just tastefully designed and timeless. I don't think they'll ever go out of fashion. So I'm always happy to see these going up.
I look around the table. I look at the only board member that was probably around when we did this, which was Lloyd. We actually hired a consultant to design these signs. They're not inexpensive, but they're also meant to last the test of time.
Yeah.
I've seen what cars do to them, and it stops the car actually. But this is really nice. We're excited to finally be there to have this close to the end. And so, hats off to Lloyd for having a great vision at the beginning, many years ago, to get us this far.
Hi, Colin. I just, along with these signages, what's evolved is the signage that goes with the bike trails and stuff, and I think it was really useful, and I just think they really help interconnectivity of the parks, of the various parks, and with the city in general.
I agree. A well-maintained sign system that's well-designed really sets the tone for a park system. If you have great signage that looks professional, it just starts the approach and the use and the people's not misuse, the respectfulness of the park. So it's been a good investment. I say some things are expensive, but they're worth that investment.
Totally agree. Yep. Speaking of a good investment, so
Segue.
as a quick introduction to this project, we thought it would be most powerful to show you the existing conditions of Pioneer Columbus Community Recreation Center's exterior. Flash forward to current state, the exterior painting was the first project we undertook in 2019 at this property. It was truly a game changer for this site. Our next project will include an updated landscape that should begin installation this fall and may take through early spring 2020 to wrap up.
Before you move on this one, I think that the planning team has a great vision here is those white spaces that are square or larger, like rectangular. At some point, we would like to entertain the idea of some public art to go on those. So maybe we'd come in and paint those. The previous picture does not look like a recreation center when you come to the neighborhood. It looked like some kind of sterile government building where maybe you did something other than recreate at. So the neighborhood's been really excited about this, and now people understand, yes, I have really arrived at the community recreation center. So stay tuned for maybe some public art down the road.
So you may have visited Sargent Park for its well-known natural playscape, spray ground, or to see the wetland resource go through all of its spectacular seasonal changes. Most people did not visit because of 4 Mile Creek, but we think that might change now that the Creek Bank Restoration Project has opened up views and stabilized the edges. The project is substantially complete after 2 major repairs were needed following the last 2 flood events and should be finalized within the month. Every year we have funding allocated for renovating 1 existing tennis court surface. Because of the contractor's timing, we're able to group Waveland with fiscal year 19 funding and Sayers with fiscal year 20 funding to save costs on bidding and contractor mobilization, which then allowed us to include new pickleball lines on Birdland courts. The contractor's schedule was thrown off by wet weather, but we do expect the project to still finish before the end of this fall. That's funny, these tennis court resurfacing contractors travel around a region, and if they get hung up in one spot, then their travel schedule is completely thrown off. And it has been so challenging for us because of all the programming that takes place there and just general people wanting to play. And so we're hoping that this they actually mobilize this week. So. The Trestle to Trestle Trail has been impacted by 2 separate projects during this construction season. The Parks project to stabilize the bank from shifting on the layer of shale that the site sits on is complete. The WRA is trying to wrap up their sewer project and then repair the remaining damage that was incurred by this work. Once that's wrapped up, we'll be open for trail use as usual, and that will be a big relief. George Whitmer Park in the East Village is scheduled for a major upgrade in September thanks to a generous donation from Wells Fargo to the Friends of Des Moines Parks. Here you can see existing conditions of this about half-acre site. These renderings depict the ambitious plan to fully redesign the park to be a more welcoming gateway into the East Village and fun to use by all ages. Construction is underway with the contractor's work set to be complete prior to the September volunteer build day. The work at Ashby Park would not have been undertaken had it not been for a generous bequeath from the estate of Gordon Greger. The only instructions provided were that the funding should go towards gardens in Ashby Park. Overall, we are trying to get away from high-maintenance annual gardens, but Ashby Park is home to a wooded area that showed potential for a feature completely new to our system, a woodland garden, with a soft surface trail system allowing people to access spaces within the park that have not been traversed in memory. Work has been underway clearing out invasive and non-native species to make way for a bit of sun to bring back life to the woodland flowers that have hung on for years of subprime conditions. Already, with just a couple of seasons of change, existing natives are coming out stronger than expected. Our greenhouse is helping to propagate additional woodland flower species to be added, and trail construction will continue throughout the summer. Very coincidentally, Meredith Corporation, through Rebuilding Together, is also interested in Ashby Park for an October build day. We visited the park with them last week, and the opportunity to have Meredith volunteers helping to plant the woodland flowers tipped the scales in favor of going forward with the project. That may also include playground equipment, new site furnishings, trees, and potentially an artist-designed backboard mural at the tennis court. You may recall last year that we showed you Phase 1 improvements at Bell Turner Park, and we have been able to nearly complete the finishing touches with the Phase 2 improvements. This tucked away neighborhood park, almost the furthest north in our system, is a gem. We hope you can all visit soon. We dedicated the fully renovated park last Thursday, July 18th, to a full house of neighbors and supporters. The dedication was followed by our weekly Free Flicks event later that evening. The much anticipated Phase 2 of the Des Moines River Trail, now named the Carl Voss Trail, is officially under construction. Tree clearing is complete and the general contractor is beginning to mobilize with the intent of being 80% complete before this winter and wrapping up in the spring of 2020. This 2.5-mile segment was supported by $1.65 million of grant funding that will traverse some of the most beautiful terrain in our system. That was a record for any one project like this in grant funding, and we hope to do the same for our next section. Flooding has taken a true toll on our system for almost a continuous year. The Gailey-Wilson Trail has been impacted during every high water event, but construction is underway to fix the damage as we speak. Harmon Park is another site impacted by flooding and will be re-repaired by the same contractor currently working on Gailey-Wilson. We are coordinating with FEMA to review sites that see repeated impact to determine if mitigation funding might be available to help with some of the more intensive repairs or redesign to lessen the ongoing flooding impacts. 4 major construction projects are converging on Grays Lake Park at once in 2019, and with timelines exacerbated by flood impacts, we are ready to be moving on from at least 2 of the 4. The first on the list is the Raccoon River Stabilization Project, which you can see from this existing conditions photo could not have come at a better time. In essence, the work shored up the riverside of the berm that separates the river from the park, and as a result, realigned the elevation of the existing trail. I know George is going to tease me again, but the devil is truly in the details. And notice the lovely colored buff rock rather than the bright white, the tedious live staking of willows to revegetate the bank in strategic areas, and the refinished light poles. A huge silver lining of this work is the excess soil cut from this site to complete the project was able to be used at the Bancroft Bowl by McCray Park, which we'll see in just a minute. Related to the trail rebuild that was part of the Riverbank project, 3 additional sections of the trail encircling Grays Lake were also renovated in 2019. You can see that the condition really needed attention with a variety of issues exhibited. I'm happy to report that only backfilling the edges of the paving remains for the project to be complete, even with the flood repairs. We expect this work to be done within about a month. The Gray Station Bridge is one of 2 projects impacting the park brought to us by others. The bridge will connect the Hubble Gray Station development with the park across the Raccoon River, and is part of the development agreement between the city and Hubble. Construction has been going well, progressing as anticipated, and last week was especially exciting with the installation of the prefabricated bridge sections. You can see here the crane on the barge. That seems like it would be an exciting day at work. Completion is anticipated by year end. The Ruan Connector below Fleur Drive linking Waterworks Park to Grays Lake was initiated by the Waterworks Foundation, and its construction is inching forward concurrent with the progress of Fleur Drive. Here you see the planned facade, and here you see how it intersects with the existing trail on the Grays Lake side. Completion is currently expected mid-spring of 2020.
Well, wait.
Oh, yep.
Did you say mid-spring of 2020?
That's the report from the engineering project manager for the connector, the Ruan Connector.
Okay.
I just want to pause too and tell you that just those 3 projects alone could take up our whole planning department. That's all they could do. As you might guess, there's little room for any air to do anything at Grays Lake to manage donor expectations, user expectations, the politicians' expectations, and our own expectations. Was an amazing lift that took a lot of coordination and a lot of people working together. And I know that everybody's been patient, especially our board. This is why Grays Lake has had such limited hours this year. We could have done these one by one, which would have been a mistake because you would have had 3 years of major disruption. So to do 1 year of major disruption was probably the best outcome we were going to get. But I want to thank you as a board for your patience and helping us tell that story. And I definitely want to tell the planning team and Ron's team, who had to manage people that didn't want to follow the rules during construction, as well as setting up all the rules we put in place to manage this. They did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Not over yet.
Not
but
over yet,
yes,
I
we'll
know.
Get there. We'll get there.
Yep.
But you think about it, there's 3, 6, we're approaching $7.5 million of work at Grays Lake as we speak. Our annual construction budget average has been closer to $4.5 million for the entire park system. And what you've seen in front of all these projects right now, start doing the math in your head, you can tell you we've had a record year, which is a good problem to have, but our staff is still the same level of staff.
So most of our ponds and many of our other areas within parks are actually part of the city's overall stormwater management system by default. McRae Pond is no different, and the stormwater that flows in brings sediment with it. Over time, the pond filled in to the point that if someone from 80 years ago would see it, they wouldn't even recognize it. So this dredging project will restore the pond back to its useful, beautiful past identity and even improve it. You'll see here that about 30% construction progress even shows a lot of promise. And here at about 75% complete, along with special features such as fish habitat structures and the flow control structure, we anticipate the project wrapping up by late fall and many happy neighbors.
And one of the things about what you're seeing in those lower 2 pictures is a sustainability feature that will allow us to manage better than we've ever managed before. Ideally, and it should always work like we've designed these things, that will catch the silt, it'll spin out and drop there where we'll be able to get it before it enters the pond. So depending on what type of rainfall we have every year, what's coming down the creek, it might take 1 or 2 times a year or maybe 1 or 2 times every other year to clean that back out. But that will stop it and help that pond's dredging life last a lot longer for future taxpayers.
Yeah. It's a technical name is a 4-bay, and over at Whitmer Pond, they've got one over there as well. So yeah, it's a much needed and will save a ton of funding over time.
When do you think fishing will be available at that pond?
So I would say that if it does wrap up as we expect late fall, I would say, boy, it has to be restocked. And we've been working collaboratively very closely with the DNR for all of that. They've helped us even choose some of the fish habitat structures. I would say, gosh, depending on what they stock with, it might be almost immediate and it might take a year or so. Yeah. Yeah, but if you'd like more information, we can find out what they are going to stock with and report back on that.
Please do.
Okay, definitely will. Great question, thank you. So speaking of Whitmer Park, brings us to our grand finale. Appreciate you all mustering through this. Whitmer Park improvements have been our to-do list for a number of years, and we finally had success in receiving a REAP grant to seed the project and kick off Phase 1 in 2017. Phase 1 is concentrated on natural resource restoration, path system, and 2 open-air shelters. The Neighborhood Association was excited enough by this that they jumped in early on as a great collaborator, so a second phase is on deck that I can't wait to share with you in the near future, but it will be focused on playground and restroom, for which they are actively fundraising. We've been incredibly lucky with the contractor on board, being organized, competent, and motivated to progress. The quality of the work can be seen in these images, and we also can't wait to see how this project turns out. Well, there you have it. I appreciate your time and interest and support, not just during construction season, but year-round. As Ben mentioned, we've been running in all different directions this year, and I appreciate your focus tonight too. That took about twice as long as what I had hoped. Each one of these could be their own case study, trying to pull out bits and pieces of what might be interesting in about 15 seconds each is difficult, but I really would be happy to take any questions. If you think of anything also after this evening, please feel free to email me or call, and I'd be happy to talk through any of it too. So I know that is a lot at one time. So,
We have a different contractor at McGray Park than we do at Whitmer.
yes. So McCray Park right now, there are three different contractors. The one that is almost complete with the overlook is actually the same contractor that is at Whitmer. So that was great. Kester is their name. They are doing a fantastic job. We have different contractor on the road. That's a different story. And then the dredging contractor actually is doing a very good job as well. They were moving really quickly, and then because of the high water, had to move on to a different project, and now they are remobilized over at McRae and trying to wrap that up.
Who's the road contractor at McGray?
That's TK Concrete.
I think we're just overwhelmed with all that you accomplish. It's remarkable.
Well, thank you for saying that, and a lot of credit goes to a lot of other people as well. I mean, we call on Ron's staff especially for a lot of help, daily. Yeah. And engineering, public works, the credit goes to a lot of folks, but we all enjoy our job, and it's a labor of love and lifetime client, and we're excited to see the progress. So, and appreciate your support. Actually, our new park planner started Monday last week, Derek Hansen, and he's already made a huge impact. So we appreciate that so much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
I'd like to personally thank you, Jenny, and all of your team for all the great work that you've done with us on the Whitmer project. So,
thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, that's a great one too. There's so many good ones, but it's been super fun.
We're gonna have to buy some new scissors because they're getting dull from all the dedications
Yeah.
we're doing. I want you guys to know if you see that come through. So.
Are you sure you didn't leave one out somewhere?
Probably did.
Well, those are just the major ones.
They were tired.
You did a great job, and the board is very appreciative of Ben and you and the work you guys do and his staff. Thank you very much.
I just want to reiterate one more time that Jenny does a great job of leading these things, and she's our quarterback, and we wouldn't do it without her. But Ron and Matt and their teams are along the whole way because we like to design things that we can maintain.
Mm-hmm.
So they do a good job of communicating. We don't just build something and say, here you go, Ron, it's your problem. Most of the time, we don't get to Ron, I should say. But so I want to thank all of our team, because there's a lot of thought that goes behind the scenes on these things. And it would be remiss if we didn't thank legal with some of the agreements we have with our donors, and engineering behind the scenes doing all these things. And if he's watching, the city manager for giving the budget to do these things, so, and the council. So a lot of people involved.
A big team.
Yep, definitely.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation, and you did pick out snippets of interest on each one, and I appreciate that, and so does this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And next year, if you just want top 10, I'm happy to take that feedback too. So.
Any questions? Any other questions? Thank you very, very much.
Okay, but truly do follow up if you think of anything. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, too.
Ben, any comments on that before we move on?
Thank you, though.
Okay. We have a couple of people that are not here on different committees. Does any committee, whether it be a golf, cemetery, or greenways, have anything to add to the... Joel, thank you for all you did. You and Ganesh are tremendous going through that. How many other chapters do we have to go through after?
I think we're done. I mean, if I go back and bring these guys one more assignment on chapters, I might not be here.
Oh my God, I'm ready to tap out on this reading that you
Well,
said.
we've got rules coming up sometime this winter. I'm going to work on the rules. That way, our gift as a board and the staff will be to the next generation. This has all been updated.
Anything else to add, board? Anything else to add? Has everyone had a great time tonight?
Fantastic.
Yeah, beautiful weather. Beautiful weather. Okay, with that, and no one else to add, Joel, we're going to turn it over to you.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Really?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Great meeting. Thank you, everybody.